Behind the unassuming facade of Romano's Italian kitchen lay a dumpster that had become a sort of oasis for me. It wasn't for the gourmet delights, but for the punctuality. Precisely at 9:30 a.m., they'd discard bread there, often still warm, carefully wrapped in plastic. At 43, with 16 years as a licensed veterinarian under my belt, I had structured my daily routine around this dumpster ritual. That October morning greeted me with frost on my sleeping bag and a hunger that made my head spin. The worn-out coat I'd found by a donation bin no longer offered protection from the cold. Winter was approaching, and I knew what that meant for people like me. For some, it would be their last. I had just pulled an unfinished lasagna from the bin, still in its plastic container, when I heard footsteps on the wet asphalt. The sound spoke of expensive shoes, a crisp, confident tap, unlike the shuffle of security guards or the aggressive stomp of those about to chase me away. Michael Thompson. The voice was restrained and professional. Michael James Thompson. I slowly turned around, clutching the lasagna container in my hands. Standing before me was a man who looked like he'd stepped right out of a law firm's advertisement. A dark blue suit, likely worth more than my monthly income. A silver tie, a leather briefcase gleaming even in the dim morning light. His gray hair was impeccably styled despite the wind. Who's asking? My voice was hoarse, betraying 3 months of street life that had altered my speech, my posture, and my gaze. My name is Harold Blackstone. I'm a probate lawyer from New York. He reached into his jacket's inner pocket, and I tensed up, but instead of a weapon, he produced a photograph. Is this you? The picture was taken in 2018. The photo showed me in a white veterinary coat, standing in front of my clinic, smiling as if the whole world belonged to me. Back then I had a home, a job I loved, a wife I thought loved me, and a daughter who still answered my calls. Where did you get that? Your great-uncle, Rudolph Hartley, passed away last month in Manhattan. You are mentioned in his will. I couldn't help but laugh, a harsh, bitter sound. Uncle Rudolph, who used to send me $5 in a birthday card every year until I turned 18 and then disappeared. I haven't heard from him in 25 years. Blackstone's expression didn't change. Mr. Hartley was reserved in his family interactions, but he kept tabs on everyone. He knew about your veterinary practice in Cedar Falls, about your divorce from Veronica, and about your current situation. My current situation? I glanced down at my dirty jeans, which I hadn't taken off in 2 weeks, and my boots held together with duct tape. You mean he knew I'd been homeless for 3 months? Yes. Blackstone's voice softened slightly. He knew everything, and left you his entire estate. The lasagna container slipped from my hands, hitting the ground with a dull thud. His penthouse in Manhattan's Upper East Side, his 40-foot yacht docked in the Hamptons, his investment portfolio, art collection, rare books. The total value is approximately $47 million. My legs gave out. I grabbed the edge of the dumpster to keep from falling. This is some kind of scam. You're up to something. Blackstone pulled a document from his briefcase. The law firm Blackstone, Whitman, and Partners represented Mr. Hartley for 30 years. Here's my business card, my license number, and a copy of the death certificate. You can verify everything. I stared at the papers, the official seals, the numbers that seemed unreal. $47 million. 6 months ago, Veronica had laughed at me outside the courthouse. No one will ever love a pauper like you, she'd said, getting into her new boyfriend Clayton's BMW. You'll die alone on the streets, Michael. You're pathetic. You're pathetic, Michael. Utterly alone on this street. It echoed like a verdict. There must be some terrible mistake, I tried to argue. Uncle Rudolph had very successful relatives. My cousin Damon is doing well on Wall Street, and Trevor is a renowned surgeon at Mount Sinai. Why would he leave everything to me? There is one condition, Blackstone said, and in those words, I sensed the catch, the fly in the ointment that could spoil the whole thing. Mr. Hartley left clear instructions. You must immediately travel to New York to his penthouse and view a video message he recorded. Only then will you learn what you need to do to receive the inheritance. Otherwise, if you refuse or delay, in 72 hours the entire estate will pass to another beneficiary, someone you know very well, your ex-wife, Veronica Thompson. The lawyer paused meaningfully, carefully observing Michael's reaction. The world around me spun. My heartbeat hammered in my ears, the cold from my sleeping bag pierced to my bones, and the despair of the past few months weighed heavily on me. "Mr. Thompson," Blackstone said, checking his Rolex, which glinted in the morning sun, "my car awaits. We can be in New York by noon. You'll have a chance to shower, change, and eat a proper meal. Regardless of your decision about the inheritance, at least grant yourself that much." I glanced at the dumpster that had served as my impromptu breakfast table, at the dirty alley where I'd learned to sleep with one eye open, at a life that had ceased to resemble life. Somewhere in Manhattan, a penthouse and $47 million awaited me. All that was required was to find out what price my late uncle had demanded. "Give me 5 minutes," I said. "I need to tell someone I'm leaving." As I went to find Jeremy, a Vietnam veteran who had taught me to distinguish safe shelters from truly helpful churches, I couldn't shake the feeling that Uncle Rudolph had been planning this for a very long time. An uncle I barely remembered, but who faithfully sent $5 for each birthday, as if watching me from afar, waiting for me to sink low enough to learn some lesson he intended. The lawyer in the expensive suit still stood by the dumpster, as out of place in that alley as hope in a homeless shelter. But he was real. The documents were real, and somewhere in New York my late uncle had left me either a vast fortune or one final cruel joke. Either way, it had to be better than rummaging through dumpsters while my ex-wife told everyone I was already dead. Just a year and a half ago, I had everything a small-town veterinarian could dream of. My clinic on Maple Street in Cedar Falls, Ohio, was unremarkable from the outside. Just a converted 2-story house with a sign that read, "Thompson Veterinary Care." But inside, it was my kingdom. I knew every corner of the examination rooms, personally installed the surgical lights, and painted the walls a soft blue, knowing the shade calmed anxious animals. The morning my life began to unravel started as usual. I was examining Mrs. Patterson's old tabby cat when Veronica called. "We need to talk tonight," she said in a tone that had become increasingly common in her voice, "and don't tell me you're working late again." Veronica and I had been married for 15 years. We met when she brought her roommate's sick ferret in, just as I was finishing vet school and she was working at a bank. She liked my nervous jokes and said she admired a man who cared for helpless creatures. But over time, that admiration turned into resentment. "Why can't you be more ambitious?" she started asking about 5 years into our marriage. "Look at Nadine's husband, Robert. He just made partner at his firm. They're going to Cabo next month for vacation." Nadine was Veronica's best friend from college, and comparing their lives to Nadine and Robert's had become Veronica's favorite pastime. Robert bought Nadine a Tesla for her birthday. Robert invested early in crypto. Robert took Nadine to Paris for their anniversary. Veronica dreamed of a trip to Paris for their anniversary. I tried to make her understand that I was perfectly content with my life, that we were doing well. We owned our home, practically debt-free except for the mortgage, and I was doing work I considered important. "Mrs. Chen's golden retriever is alive and well thanks to the surgery I successfully performed last week," I tried to explain. "Doesn't that mean anything?" "That doesn't pay for a vacation home," she retorted, as if my arguments held no weight. That fateful evening when she announced the divorce, I found her in the bedroom, packing a suitcase. "I'm seeing Clayton Morgridge," she stated in a casual tone, as if announcing a change in her favorite supermarket. "He's an executive at Farmesh Industries. He actually has ambition." Michael Clayton Morgridge. I'd glimpsed him once at a town charity gala. A dazzling smile and a firm handshake. The quintessential successful man who, 20 years after college, still wore his class ring and never missed an opportunity to point out his watch cost more than someone's car. The divorce was painful and brutal, exceeding my darkest expectations. Veronica's lawyer insisted she had sacrificed her career to support my humble beginnings. This was despite her having changed 3 jobs in 10 years, never getting along with her bosses. The judge ruled in her favor, awarding her the house, half the value of the clinic, and monthly alimony that would utterly cripple me financially. My mother, Dorothy, at 71, tried to help. She lived on modest Social Security and a small pension left after my father's death. He had worked for the phone company for 30 years. then died 5 years ago of a heart attack while mowing the lawn before the ambulance could arrive. My mother offered me all her savings, $8,000. I can't take your money, Mom, I replied, sitting in her kitchen where the scent of apple pie she baked every Sunday still lingered. Your father would want me to help, she insisted, her hands trembling slightly as she wrote the check. I accepted the money, promising to repay it, though I knew I likely never could. My younger brother, Dennis, had found more success, managing a chain of hardware stores in Columbus. When I reached out to him for a loan to keep the clinic afloat while I sorted out my debts, he went silent. Mike, I have my own family to take care of. Maybe it's a sign you should try something else. Veronica always said you could achieve more. Even Dennis had sided with her. The clinic couldn't bear the financial burden. I had to lay off Jennifer, my assistant of 8 years. Then Marcus, the administrator. Eventually, I was alone, working 16-hour days and sleeping in the back room to save on gas. My last patient was a stray dog found near a supermarket, hit by a car and with a leg broken in 2 places. I treated her, knowing I wouldn't get a cent for it, and knowing it would be my last surgery. The next day, the bank foreclosed on the property. My daughter Bethany was 16 then, in her senior year of high school. Veronica had completely turned her against me. Mom says you chose your stupid animals over your family, she texted. She says you could have been a real doctor, but you weren't smart enough. Those words hurt me more than losing everything else. 3 weeks after the foreclosure, I was living in my truck. When that was repossessed too, all I had left was a backpack, a sleeping bag, and a complete lack of prospects. My first night on the streets, I wandered until dawn, too scared to sleep and too proud to cry. By the 3rd month, I had mastered the brutal arithmetic of homeless life, where to find food in dumpsters, which corners the police avoided, and which shelters wouldn't steal your shoes while you slept. The last time I saw Veronica was near a Walmart, where I sometimes picked up odd jobs. She was leaving the store with Clayton, both carrying shopping bags and chatting animatedly. She noticed me before I could turn away. The disgust on her face was unmistakable. God, Michael, you smell like a sewer, she said loudly enough to attract attention. This is what you've become. Thank God Bethany doesn't have to see this. She doesn't have to see this. The silence echoed like a judgment. Clayton, trying to hide his discomfort, put an arm around her, guiding her toward his BMW. But Veronica, as if possessed, wouldn't let up. You're pathetic, she yelled after me, her voice ringing with contempt. No woman will ever want you again. You'll die alone, lost in some dirty alley, and no one will even notice you're gone. 6 long weeks had passed since that fateful day. Every morning, waking on hard cardboard or cold concrete, those words echoed in my mind. She was probably right. Men who fell into such a chasm rarely climbed back out. They simply dissolved into the crowd, becoming faceless statistics, names on forgotten forms. And now here I stood in this forgotten alley with Harold Blackstone, clutching papers that confirmed I was the heir to millions. My mind struggled to reconcile the man I once was with the pathetic creature I had become. Somewhere on the journey from respected veterinarian with a kind heart and gentle voice to this lost stranger who knew all the seedy spots to find leftover food, I had lost myself. But Uncle Rudolph, it turned out, had been watching me all this time, waiting for me to hit rock bottom and preparing something that was, as yet, incomprehensible. That October morning, destined to change everything, began with me waking behind an inconspicuous loading dock. The biting cold stiffened my joints, making them ache like an old man's. I wasn't even sure what day of the week it was. Maybe Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. The days had blurred into a monotonous gray, where the only landmarks were dumpsters and their collection schedules. Romano's Italian restaurant discarded fresh bread precisely at 9:30 a.m. The owner, Mr. Romano, was a decent man and always double-bagged the discards, trying to put something good on top. He seemed to understand that people like me depended on his mercy. Once, he caught my eye from the back door as I rummaged through the bags, and instead of chasing me away, he simply nodded a greeting and disappeared inside. I had just found a container of almost untouched lasagna, likely from a customer who ordered too much, when I heard footsteps. Crisp, confident, the sound of expensive shoes cutting through the wet asphalt. After 3 months on the streets, I had learned to identify danger by sound alone. Mr. Michael James Thompson. The man standing before me seemed the embodiment of respectability and affluence, an impeccable dark blue suit, not a single wrinkle, a silver tie catching the sunlight, shoes likely worth more than my best week's earnings. He was about 60, with elegant gray hair, and carried himself with the effortless confidence of a man who'd never had to worry about his next meal. "Who's asking?" My voice was guarded, ready to bolt at any second. "My name is Harold Blackstone. I'm a probate lawyer from the law firm Blackstone, Whitman and Partners in New York." He slowly reached into his jacket's inner pocket, as if fearing that sudden movements might spook me. "I've been looking for you for the past 2 weeks. He produced a photograph and my heart skipped a beat. The picture was of me, from a past life, standing in front of my clinic in a pristine white coat, a smile on my face as if I knew all the answers, a neat haircut, a cleanly shaven face. Hope still flickered in my eyes. "Is this you, circa 2018? Where did you get that?" The photo was from my clinic's website, which should have been taken down months ago when I stopped paying for hosting. "Your great-uncle, Rudolph Hartley, passed away last month in Manhattan. Before his death, he hired private investigators to gather up-to-date information on all family members." Blackstone's tone was dry and businesslike, as if tracking relatives was an everyday occurrence. "You were particularly difficult to locate after you lost your permanent residence." Uncle Rudolph. Only a few memories of him surfaced, all from distant childhood. Tall, always dressed in severe dark suits, he would appear at family gatherings but never actively participate. He faithfully sent birthday cards with $5 bills until I turned 18, then disappeared. Mom sometimes mentioned him, her mother's younger brother, who had made a fortune in New York and forgotten his Ohio roots. Forgetting his Ohio roots, the protagonist found himself in a situation where the past suddenly caught up with him. "I haven't spoken to Uncle Rudolph in a quarter century," I said. "Why would he need me?" "He named you the sole heir to his entire estate," came the reply. The lasagna container slipped from my hands, its contents splattering across the sidewalk. "That can't be," I stammered. "Believe me, it's quite real and perfectly legal," Blackstone assured me, opening his briefcase with polished professionalism. "Hartley's assets include a penthouse apartment in Manhattan valued at $12 million, a $3 million yacht in the Hamptons, a substantial art collection, a collection of rare editions, and an investment portfolio estimated at $32 million. The total value of the inheritance, after all taxes and fees, amounted to $47 million. I grabbed the edge of the dumpster, feeling dizzy. $47 million, a sum that seemed unreal. Just yesterday, I was fighting another homeless man for scraps of food, and today this stranger in an expensive suit was telling me about sudden wealth. "This is some kind of trick," I blurted out, though I knew con artists wouldn't bother with someone like me. "What could you possibly have to steal from me? A sleeping bag and Dorndarnti tucked into my boot?" Blackstone produced documents bearing seals and watermarks from his briefcase. A death certificate, a will registered with the New York State Surrogates Court, my credentials from the State Bar Association. "Our firm has handled the Hartley family's affairs for 30 years, he explained, displaying each document. "But why me?" My voice trembled. "Uncle Rudolph has successful relatives. My cousin Damon works at Goldman Sachs, and Aunt Francine's son, Trevor, is a surgeon. They kept in touch with him, visited him. Why did he leave everything to the failure of the family?" A semblance of sympathy crossed Blackstone's face. "There are certain conditions to the inheritance. Mr. Hartley left instructions that cannot be discussed here. You must come to New York, to his penthouse, and view a video message he recorded before his death. Only then will you learn what is required to receive the inheritance." Of course, there was a catch. "What's the condition?" I asked. "I'm forbidden to discuss it outside the residence," Blackstone replied, glancing at his Rolex, which glinted in the sun. "However, I can tell you that you have 72 hours to learn the conditions. Should you decline or fail to appear, the entire estate will pass to another heir." "To whom?" "Your ex-wife, Veronica Thompson." This news stunned me. Veronica, who had taken everything in the divorce, who had gloated over my downfall, who had predicted my ignominious death on the streets. The thought of her getting Uncle Rudolph's millions made me feel sick to my stomach. Mr. Hartley thoroughly investigated the situation, Blackstone continued. He was aware of your divorce, of Ms. Thompson's current relationship with Clayton Morgridge, and of her financial difficulties after her breakup with Mr. Morgridge, who left her for his secretary 3 months ago. Clayton left Veronica. Somewhere deep inside, in the part of my soul that street life hadn't yet killed, a flicker of satisfaction sparked. A private jet awaits you at the regional airport, Blackstone informed me. We can be in New York by noon. There are showers and fresh clothes prepared for you in the airport lounge. Regardless of your decision about the inheritance, Mr. Thompson, allow yourself at least a decent meal and a night in humane conditions. I looked around at my current world, the dumpster that served as my source of sustenance, the cardboard I had planned to sleep on, Jeremy's cart in the distance with an American flag fluttering in the wind. This was my current life, but it didn't have to stay that way. It was not destined to remain the same. What is the condition? I asked, speaking more to myself than to Blackstone. I can only say that Mr. Hartley believed in testing character through hardship. In his final message, he mentioned that he chose you for reasons that will soon become clear. A test of character through hardship. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. If this was a test, I had been failing it for the past 3 months, sinking deeper into despair with each passing day. Give me an hour, I finally said. I need to say goodbye to someone, and I need to think this through. Of course. Blackstone handed me his business card. The thick card felt alien in my calloused hands. The car will be waiting for you at the corner of 5th Avenue and Main Street, a black Lincoln Town car with license plate BWA 0001. He departed, the sound of his expensive shoes echoing on the pavement. I stood there, clutching the business card, whose value likely surpassed all my possessions combined. Somewhere in distant New York, my late uncle, whom I barely remembered, had set up some kind of game, a condition that would either bestow upon me $47 million or give everything to the woman who had broken my heart. I found Jeremy 2 blocks away, meticulously sorting the aluminum cans he'd collected. "Hey, brother," I called out to him. "Something extraordinary has happened. Either I'm incredibly lucky or I'm the victim of the cruelest joke in human history." Jeremy was by the old Texaco gas station, maniacally precise in sorting aluminum cans into his cart. Each can was perfectly flattened and categorized by manufacturer. Old habits he'd acquired during his Army service refused to let go, even after 40 years on the streets. "Jeremy," I called, and he looked up at me. His weathered face broke into a toothless grin. "Mike from Michigan, get yourself some breakfast? Romano's usually has good stuff on Tuesdays." That's what he called me, Mike from Michigan, despite my countless corrections that I was from Ohio. To Jeremy, it didn't matter. In his world, everyone was supposed to have an alias. "Listen, brother, something unusual has happened." I pulled out Blackstone's business card. The paper was so white it seemed to glow in the gray morning light. "A lawyer just found me. He says my uncle passed away and left me an inheritance. A huge inheritance." Jeremy squinted at the card, then looked at me. "You've been hitting the mouthwash again. That stuff makes you hallucinate." "I'm serious. He insists I go to New York today." If this is true, if even a small part of this is true, I might never come back. Jeremy set aside his cans and looked at me more intently. In these 3 months, he had taught me everything necessary to survive on the streets. Which shelters had bed bugs, which ones offered decent security, how to stay warm with newspapers and cardboard, where the police would leave you alone if you kept quiet. He had saved my life more than once, pulling me back from the brink of despair when I was ready to give up. "Remember what I told you your first week out here?" he asked. "Don't trust anyone who offers anything for free." Another piece of wisdom I'd absorbed in those terrible days. Every door that closes opens the way to another. You just have to live long enough to find it. Exactly. He rummaged in his cart and pulled out something wrapped in plastic. He handed it to me. It was a watch, old but clean, with real hands instead of a digital display. "Found it last week. Saved it for trade, but you need it more than I do. Rich people value time." That gesture broke something inside me. A man who had nothing was giving me one of his few valuables. "Jeremy, I can't take this." "You can, and you will." There was a steeliness in his voice. The sergeant he once was had reemerged. And if this turns out to be true, if you get that money, don't forget about us out here. Don't become one of those people who cross the street to avoid seeing who they once were. If it works out, I'll come back for you. I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep, Michigan. Just remember, we are people, and all we want is to be seen as people. In a surge of unexpected camaraderie during the darkest period of my life, I squeezed his shoulder in support. Then I headed towards the intersection of Fifth Avenue and Main Street, where a black Lincoln with its engine running awaited me, and Blackstone was seated in the back. The drive to the airport felt surreal. The leather seats, incredibly soft after months spent on concrete and cardboard, offered a sense of luxury. The car even had heated seats, a feature I had forgotten existed. Blackstone handed me a folder filled with documents detailing Uncle Rudolph's estate, but the pages, filled with legal jargon, slid past my attention. At the private terminal of the regional airport, Blackstone led me to a lounge whose existence I hadn't even suspected. "The showers are over there," he indicated, adding, "I took the liberty of ordering you some clothes, guessing your size from old driver's license records." Showering was pure bliss. Hot water flowed endlessly, and cedar-scented soap was a stark contrast to the industrial disinfectant. I stood under the spray for about 20 minutes, watching months of street life wash down the drain. My hands, clean and manicured, felt alien, and my nails looked human again, free of ingrained dirt. The clothes fit perfectly: dark jeans, a button-down shirt, and a dark blue blazer. Nothing extravagant, but all new and clean. Looking in the mirror, I could almost see my old self, if I ignored the hollowed cheeks and the dulled gaze. On the private jet, Blackstone offered me coffee and sandwiches. Real coffee, brewed from beans, not the instant packets I'd pilfered from gas stations. The turkey, Swiss, and crisp lettuce sandwich was delicious. I ate slowly, feeling my shrunken stomach protest the sudden abundance of food. "Tell me about Uncle Rudolph," I asked as the plane ascended above the clouds. About the real Rudolph, not the image he wanted to project to the world. Blackstone chose his words carefully. Rudolph Hartley was brilliant, eccentric, and by his own choice, a solitary man. He made his fortune in rare book dealing and art appraisal, but his true talent lay in his ability to read people. He could spot a forgery just by looking at a painting or manuscript, and more importantly, he could discern a seller's entire history just by looking at them. Yet he chose to leave his entire fortune to a nephew he hadn't seen in decades. He kept dossiers on every family member, Blackstone revealed. For your cousin Damon, the investment banker, he tracked every transaction and every SEC filing. For your cousin Trevor's surgical career, every patient review and every malpractice lawsuit. And for you, he used private investigators who sent monthly reports on your veterinary practice, your marriage, and your downfall. He watched me become homeless and did nothing? I asked bitterly. He was dying of pancreatic cancer, and by the time you lost everything, he had only weeks to live. But yes, he watched. He used to say, "Suffering reveals a man's character in ways success never can." New York appeared in the plane's window. The famous skyline, reaching upwards like fingers trying to grasp the sky. Somewhere down there was the penthouse that was supposed to be mine. $47 million awaited me, but with a condition I couldn't imagine. "Mr. Blackstone, what kind of man sets conditions for saving his own family?" I asked. "One who believes salvation shouldn't come free," he replied. Mr. Hartley often said that unearned money had ruined more lives than poverty ever had. As we descended towards Teterboro Airport, I wondered how Veronica would react to news of this inheritance. She had left Clayton after he cheated on her, and according to Blackstone, she was facing foreclosure on the house she'd won from me in the divorce. The thought of her getting that money, if I failed whatever test Uncle Rudolph had devised, made me sick. But what worried me more were Jeremy's words, "Don't forget us here. Don't become one of those people who cross the street." A line of figures stretched along the sidewalk, like a silent procession of shadows, people crossing the street. Whatever condition Uncle Rudolph had set, a deep feeling grew within me that not only the inheritance depended on it, but also the formation of the person who would manage those funds. The aircraft touched down softly on the runway. Blackstone, rising from his seat, mechanically adjusted his tie. The penthouse is a 40-minute drive. Mr. Hartley's video message awaits in his study. Are you ready to find out what exactly he wanted to convey to you? Truth be told, I wasn't ready. After months of life where the only choice was a dumpster for food or a corner for sleep, the sudden need to make a decision, with $47 million at stake, felt like an unbearable burden. Nevertheless, I rose, smoothed my jacket, which still smelled of the store, and followed Blackstone into the intricate game his late uncle had devised. "And one more thing," Blackstone said as we headed to the waiting car. "Regardless of your impression of Mr. Hartley's message, remember that he dedicated the last weeks of his life to perfecting this plan. He passed away believing in the righteousness of his choice." The weight of that belief, placed upon me by a man I barely remembered, felt heavier than all the millions waiting for me in Manhattan. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the building, offering a captivating view of Central Park. Blackstone led me through a private elevator, accessed with a special key. When the doors opened, a world I had only seen in movies unfolded before my eyes. Panoramic windows framed Manhattan like a living canvas. The interior was elegantly understated, leather furniture, dark wood, not shouting its value but whispering it. The walls were adorned with genuine art, including what even a quick glance identified as Monet's. "Hartley's study is here," Blackstone said, accompanying me through a succession of rooms that felt more like a museum than a living space. The library, with thousands of books stretching from floor to ceiling, made a lasting impression. Some were kept behind glass cases with tiny brass plaques indicating first editions dating back centuries. The study, by contrast, had a more intimate atmosphere. At its center was a massive mahogany desk and a wall-mounted screen that seemed somewhat out of place amidst the surrounding antiques. Blackstone pointed to a leather armchair facing the screen. "The video message will play only once. Mr. Hartley was adamant about that. I'll be in the next room when you're finished." He pressed a button on the remote and the screen came to life. Uncle Rudolph appeared, and I caught my breath. He looked almost as I remembered him, but time and illness had left their mark. His face was gaunt. The expensive suit hung loosely on what was once a powerful frame, but his eyes remained sharp, intelligent, alive, and purposeful. "Hello, Michael." His voice was stronger than his appearance suggested. "If you're watching this, Harold has found you living on the streets, probably near some restaurant, surviving on discarded food. I know this because I've watched you for years, just as I've watched all my relatives. But you, Michael, turned out to be the one I was waiting for." He leaned forward, and I, without realizing it, did the same, as if drawn by an invisible force. "The condition for receiving the inheritance is this: within 5 years, you must help at least 100 people escape homelessness. Real, documented assistance. Not just handing out money, but providing what they truly need: jobs, housing, healthcare, addiction counseling, mental health support, whatever it takes. Harold will oversee the trust to verify each case. To achieve this goal, you will be granted access to the entire estate. But if you fail or refuse, everything will go to your ex-wife, Veronica." Something clenched in my chest. 100 people. The image of Jeremy, an elderly woman weeping over sandwich scraps, all those invisible souls among whom I had lived, flashed in my mind. "You're probably wondering why," Rudolph continued. "Why such a condition? Why you? Let me tell you something no one in our family knows. In 1967, I returned from Korea broken. Not physically, though there were wounds, but morally, spiritually devastated. I told no one I was home. For 2 years, I lived on the streets of New York, too proud to ask for help, too traumatized to know how to return to a normal life." Rudolph paused, his gaze fixed on the distance, as if lost in memories. He recounted how a man named Morrison found him one winter morning, delirious with fever, by the walls of a dying bookstore. This man didn't just share food or money. He offered him a job, instilled purpose in him, and provided a room above his shop. Morrison not only saved his life but brought him back to it, and he demanded nothing in return, not even revealing his last name for months. The camera subtly shifted its angle, as if Rudolph had leaned forward. He spoke of how he built his fortune thanks to that second chance. He reached the pinnacle of success, gaining wealth and respect. However, with it, he became paranoid, estranged from the world, unable to trust. He watched his family from afar, keeping a close eye on each member. He mentioned Cousin Damon, who stepped over homeless people with contempt, and Cousin Trevor, who at a medical conference Rudolph attended incognito, called them parasites. He also recalled Brother Dennis, who last Christmas ordered security to remove a homeless veteran from the entrance of his store. Every word sounded like a condemnation, not only for them, but for the version of myself I might have become before my fall. Rudolph noted that investigators reported my actions. In my first week on the streets, starving and scared, I found half a sandwich in a dumpster and gave it to an elderly woman who was starving. Last month, I spent my last $5 on antibiotics from a street vendor, not for myself, but for my veteran friend who had an infected wound, even though I myself was suffering from pneumonia. I remembered that night. Jeremy's leg was worsening by the minute, red streaks climbing higher up his knee. I was coughing up blood, but the infection could kill him faster than my pneumonia would kill me. Rudolph continued, noting that Harold had surveillance footage confirming 63 separate instances where I had helped others while having nothing myself. I had retained my humanity when I had every reason to abandon it. That was why I was inheriting everything. He leaned back, a faint smile touching his gaunt face. He added that my relatives wouldn't know until the will was publicly read next week that my ex-wife, Veronica, was on the brink of financial ruin. Clayton Mortgage had left her 3 months ago for his 26-year-old secretary. She had mortgaged the house she'd won from me in the divorce to invest in one of Clayton's schemes, which had gone bankrupt. Now she was about to lose everything. I couldn't help a grim, involuntary laugh. The irony of the situation was so perfect it stung. Rudolph explained that if I refused his condition or failed to fulfill it, she would inherit everything. He suggested I imagine the woman who had destroyed me, who had predicted my lonely death on the streets, becoming rich because of my failure. He hoped the realization of this would motivate me, but the point was that saving 100 people wasn't the real test. The real test was whether I could accept help myself, whether I could take this gift and direct it into something meaningful, instead of letting pride or bitterness destroy me. Morrison saved him, but he never truly accepted that help, never allowed himself to be grateful, and never stopped seeing himself as alone. He died in this penthouse, surrounded by riches, but in complete isolation, having pushed away everyone who tried to love him. He coughed, a rattling sound that spoke of the cancer that was killing him. He warned me not to become like him. He urged me to take the money, save 100 souls, but to save myself too. And one more thing he discovered while researching Morrison's background after his death. His full name was Morrison Thompson, and he was my grandfather, my father's father. The man who saved him was my blood, though neither of them knew it then. He died in poverty, but surrounded by love, surrounded by family, something he himself never had. He gave away everything he earned, helping strangers like me. My vision blurred. Grandfather Morrison died when I was 10, but I remembered him. A quiet, kind man who always discreetly slipped dollar bills into our pockets when Mom wasn't looking. My mother wasn't there when the voice from the screen offered Michael Thompson a life-changing deal. You see, Michael, there's no accident in this. It's like a full circle of fate. Your grandfather once saved me, now I extend a hand to you, and you in turn will help others. That's how kindness and compassion survive in this harsh world, passed down from generation to generation, like a secret fire that refuses to be extinguished. After these words, the screen went dark, then came back to life, displaying a final message. You have exactly 24 hours to reflect and make your decision, but I already foresee your answer. You're a Thompson. You won't be able to stand by. You'll help those in need because it's in your blood. It's what your grandfather taught you, even without saying a word. It's what you absorbed without even realizing it. Welcome home, nephew. The screen finally went dark, plunging the room into semi-darkness. I sat in the luxurious leather armchair of the $47 million penthouse, and tears involuntarily streamed down my cheeks. I remembered my grandfather Morrison, who once, without hesitation, took in a young veteran behind his bookstore, unaware that this act would one day save his grandson's life. At that moment, Blackstone quietly entered the room. Mr. Thompson, what is your decision? He asked discreetly. I rose from the chair, wiping tears from my face. I thought of Jeremy sorting his cans, of the elderly woman clutching a piece of bread, of all those invisible people waiting for someone to see them as individuals, not just shadows on the roadside of life. I agree, I said firmly. But I'm doing this not for the money, and not because of Veronica. I'm doing this because my grandfather would have done the same, because it's in our nature. A genuine smile flickered across Blackstone's face for the first time. Mr. Hartley anticipated precisely that answer. Then let's discuss the trust structure, he suggested. I looked out at Manhattan sprawling below. Myriads of lights, each symbolizing someone's life, story, struggle. Somewhere out there in this vast city live 100 people I was going to help, but first and foremost, I needed to save myself. Uncle Rudolph was right. Money was just a tool. The true inheritance was a chance to rediscover meaning, to become the man his grandfather would be proud of. Yes, I replied. Let's begin. After Blackstone left, I stood by the enormous windows for a long time, gazing at the city lights that began to twinkle in the evening darkness. Each light represented someone's life, someone's struggle, someone's hope. Just 24 hours ago, I was rummaging through dumpsters, and now I owned this penthouse and had $47 million to change people's destinies. The first call I made was to Jeremy. I asked Blackstone to drive me to a store to buy a new cell phone, then immediately returned to the Texaco station. Jeremy was still there, arranging his cans for tomorrow's recycling. "Mike from Michigan," he called out, noticing me step out of the Lincoln. "You look great. The lawyer didn't fool you." "It's all true, Jeremy. Every word," I replied. I sat down on the curb next to Jeremy's cart, still in my new suit, oblivious to the dirt. "I need your help." "My help, brother? You just inherited millions. What could you possibly need from me?" Jeremy asked, surprised. "I want to help 100 people get off the streets. Real help, not just handing out money. You know these streets better than any social worker. You know who needs what, who's ready for help, and who isn't." "I want to hire you as my outreach director," I proposed. Jeremy burst out laughing, but seeing my serious expression, he fell silent. "Mike, I haven't had a real job in 20 years, he said. "You've been doing this job for 20 years, you just weren't getting paid for it. You taught me to survive. You saved dozens of lives with your knowledge. I need that experience," I urged him. Within a week, I established the Hartley Foundation, naming it after Uncle Rudolph. The first office was small, just a converted storefront, but it was in the right neighborhood, accessible to people who needed help. Jeremy became my first employee, and his first suggestion changed everything. "Don't make them come to us feeling like beggars," he said. "Give them dignity. Give them choice." They developed a program where people could choose their own path to recovery. Some first needed rehabilitation, others mental health treatment. Some simply needed a chance, a job, someone to believe in them and help them become more than their worst moment. Each person received a social worker, but more importantly, they got a mentor who was there for them, understood their challenges, and helped them move forward. The third person the foundation supported was an elderly woman named Agnes, with whom the protagonist had shared his charitable initiative months ago. She needed little safe housing and help with social benefits she didn't even know she qualified for. When she was settled into a nursing home where the benefits covered all expenses, she couldn't hold back tears. "I thought I'd die on the streets," she confessed tearfully. "I thought this was the end of my story." By the foundation's 6th month of operation, 37 people had been returned to stable lives. Each success story was meticulously documented and vetted by Blackstone's auditing firm, but more importantly, each was sustainable. The foundation didn't just provide people with housing and leave them to their own devices. The staff continued to support them, providing ongoing assistance and celebrating their achievements. It was then that Veronica appeared at the foundation. Her desperation was palpable. Her eyes held the same hopelessness I had once seen in my own reflection. The designer clothes she wore during our marriage now hung loosely on her frame. The luxurious BMW was gone, and her arrogant smirk had been replaced by emptiness. "Michael," she said, standing at the foundation's door, as if unsure if she had the right to enter. "I heard about your inheritance. I heard about what you're doing." "What do you need, Veronica?" I asked directly. "Clayton left me for his secretary. The house is in foreclosure. I've been staying with friends, but they're tired of me." She avoided my gaze. "I was wrong about everything. You're worth hundreds of Claytons." You always were. I looked at the woman who had once destroyed my life, who had gloated over my downfall, who had predicted my lonely death on the streets. The old me might have felt satisfaction at her current predicament. I would have told her to search for food in the dumpsters behind Romano's so she could feel what it was like. But the man Uncle Rudolph had called me to be saw something else, a suffering human being. I can't be with you again, Veronica. That bridge is burned beyond repair, I stated firmly. I know. I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking for help finding a job, some simple work. I'm willing to work. I'll do whatever it takes. The foundation helps people experiencing homelessness. You're not there yet. I will be soon, her voice trembled. Probably next week. I handed her a business card for a regular employment agency. They're good people there. They'll help you find something. But Veronica, that's all you'll get from me. No money, no special treatment, just this referral. You need to rebuild your life on your own. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and left without another word. 3 months later, my daughter Bethany contacted me, but not because of the money. Dad, I saw an article about your foundation, she said on the phone, about the people you're helping. Mom told me lies about why you disappeared. I should have known. I should have reached out. You were a child. Your mother was all you had. Can I volunteer at the foundation? I'm 17 now. I'm old enough to help. That's how I got my daughter back, not through millions, but through serving others. She came every Saturday, helped distribute food, sort donated clothing, sat with people and listened to their stories. She particularly connected with young homeless people, runaways and outcasts, who trusted her in a way they couldn't trust adults. By the 3rd year of the foundation's operation, 86 people had received help. Some, unfortunately, couldn't maintain stability, relapsed, and ended up back on the streets. The hardest part was accepting that not everyone could be saved, that some people simply weren't ready. But most succeeded. They found jobs, reconnected with families, and reclaimed lives they thought were lost forever. Then a call came from Blackstone with news that shook my entire worldview. Michael, I found something in Mr. Hartley's papers, a 1969 journal. You need to see this. The journal entry was dated December 15th, 1969. The man who saved me finally told me his full name today, Morrison Thompson. He had been like a father to me for the past 2 years. He mentioned a son, Stephen, living in Ohio. I wonder if I'll ever meet his family, if I'll ever be able to repay that debt. Will I ever be able to repay this debt? The question echoed in the protagonist's thoughts. Stephen. That was his father's name. There's something else important, Blackstone said, delving deeper into the journal pages. Morrison Thompson knew your uncle's true identity. This is evidenced by an entry dated the same day. Morrison's handwriting, though not calligraphic, was perfectly legible. Today, I revealed my name to young Rudolph. I doubt he realizes I know his secret. Dorothy's brother, presumed missing after the war. The family had long mourned him as dead. I won't betray his trust by revealing the truth, but I'm glad for the chance to help Dorothy's descendant. Good kid. Just lost his way, but he'll find his path. My grandfather, it turned out, had kept a secret all this time. He saved his sister-in-law's brother, demanding no thanks and revealing nothing of his deed. This secret, like a stone dropped in water, created ripples that, decades later, led to Uncle Rudolph saving me. Standing in the luxurious apartment where Uncle Rudolph had died alone, I realized that the true inheritance wasn't in money or property. It was proof that kindness, like ripples on water, spreads, encompassing more and more people. Help given to others returns in unexpected ways. Love works subtly, penetrating through time and manifesting through people we barely know. By the 5th year of the foundation's operation, 103 people had escaped the grip of homelessness. The foundation grew, attracting new donors who shared a common goal. Jeremy became a recognized expert in social work, speaking at conferences on dignity and social support. My daughter, inspired by my example, studied social work in college, intending to continue the family legacy. But the most touching moment was finding an old photograph in Uncle Rudolph's desk. It depicted my grandfather's funeral, which I barely remembered. In the background, alone, stood a young Uncle Rudolph. He had come to say goodbye to the man who saved him, even though no one knew of their special connection. On the back of the photo, Rudolph's hand had written, Morrison Thompson, 1910-1985. You saved me, asking nothing in return. I will repay your kindness, I promise. And he kept his promise, through me. Through the hundreds of lives they had helped, through the thousands more the foundation would help in the future. Money was merely a tool, but the true gift was the realization that we are all connected, that kindness knows no temporal bounds, that today's homeless person could be tomorrow's savior. Uncle Rudolph learned this lesson from my grandfather. I learned it on the streets. And somewhere out there, those whom we helped will also understand it and pass the baton on to someone in need. This is how the world changes, not through multi-million-dollar inheritances, but through simple human involvement, creating chains of compassion that link generations. My grandfather had started that chain by extending a hand to a desperate veteran outside his bookstore. Uncle Rudolph had continued it, using his fortune and his belief in me. And now it was my turn to continue that chain, saving one life at a time. Standing in this penthouse, no longer homeless, but never forgetting what it felt like to be at rock bottom, I finally understood what Uncle Rudolph meant by accepting help. To accept a helping hand wasn't a sign of weakness, but the first link in a chain that would eventually pull someone else out of trouble. The fortune wasn't an end, but a beginning. And somewhere out there, Grandfather and Uncle Rudolph were watching me with satisfaction, seeing that their investment in kindness had borne fruit.